welcome you again. This is the fourth episode of this series, and in past three series we have got best of our audience and speakers throughout the globe. And next episode will be tomorrow, which will be with 3M Global Innovation Director. He is head for design, Mr. Kevin. And we look forward to again see you tomorrow. And I would like to invite Maggie for welcoming our audience and guests today. And I will give you introduction post that.
Thank you, Tushar. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It's wonderful to see so many people signing up. It's a real pleasure to be here, and also to bring to you three speakers. Two are old friends of ours, Neil Usher and Alessandro, but also to welcome Brandon, all the way I think from Singapore. So thank you, Tushar. Tushar is our founding partner in India, and these series of webinars, so many of them coming in response to the COVID, are a brilliant contribution to the workplace in India, I think, and follows on from our first conference in New Delhi last November. I'm really looking forward to the discussion this afternoon, and really intrigued to see where it's going to go, because we're just about, I believe, to go back into the workplace, and many of the themes that we've discussed in workplace trends, I think over the last year or so, and maybe even before then, are going to be coming into play. Things like active working, giving people the choice of where they want to work, remote working, that kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you, Tushar.
Thank you, Maggie. I would like to introduce our speakers today. We have Neil Usher with us. Neil is moderating today's session, and Neil has around 25 years of experience in industry and property and workplace market as a change leader. Neil has delivered innovative work environment for organizations in a variety of sectors all over the world. Neil is now Chief Partnership Officer for GoSpace, the first AI application for the workspaces. Now we have the second of our speaker, Mr. Alessandro Rinaldi. Alessandro is Head of Workspaces and Consultancy for Foster & Partner, with more than 25 years of experience in workspace strategy, real estate and design. We have Brandon Bruce with us. Brandon has been working with Haworth International, and he is Director for Ideation Services, working with in-house workplace advisors and partners across Asia Pacific, Europe and Middle East. Thank you all of you for coming to this workplace webinar series. Neil, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So the format today is that the three of us as panelists will all say a few words. We'll take 10 to 15 minutes each. I'll probably have as moderator some questions for my colleagues here. And then we're going to throw the questions open to yourselves as those who've dialed in. If you have any questions for the panelists, please submit them through the Q&A channels. And we'll aim to be finished in about an hour and a quarter's time. So hopefully that's suitable for everyone. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask Brendan to start. I believe we'll be sharing some content. Hopefully you'll find this entirely relevant to all of the challenges that you're currently facing.
Okay, everyone, so thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction, Tushar. My name is Brendan Bruce, and I'm the Director of Haworth's International Ideation Team. So that's both in Europe and in Asia. And generally we have about a dozen, 12 workplace advisors with a huge amount of experience across all markets that Haworth operates in. And to give you a slightly better idea about what we do, it's the measurement and analysis of workplace culture, understanding how organizations work, how people work, and also how space is utilized. And we do that through sensors and various other means as well. And the idea is to align corporate strategy with a productive and a flexible workspace. We call those spaces organic spaces. Now, our clients generally include obviously our direct furniture clients. Haworth is a furniture company, I'm sure most of you would know, but also with architects, with designers, with real estate companies, and of course all of our dealers across the world. So in this webinar, I've really luckily been placed under the innovation umbrella, and it's based around a program that we've been developing for the last 3 years at Haworth. It's a software program called Co-Designer. Now, I know some of you might have already seen this. I just wanted to sort of highlight our most innovative drive outside of product services and other software development. So Co-Design is a parametric planning tool, and it enables a real expression of defined parameters. And they might be workplace design standards, headcount, sharing ratios, work styles, etc. And there's some really clever algorithms. It produces a layout in real time. There's a generative part which allows designers to fine-tune and really move things around a floor plate. It provides the starting point. It doesn't do the design, but it allows for that early planning. And as you go through those iterations with clients, with stakeholders, as things change within a project, headcounts, budgets, etc., you have the ability to adapt. So I'm going to quickly show you a video. It's about 3 minutes, and I'll run through this, and I'll give you a bit of dialogue over the top of it as well, and explain what's happening. All right, so obviously you've got various inputs coming into a design. That part of the early strategy part, you've got organizational, the guidelines that a client might have, various other facts around architecture and otherwise, and you can really tune those up and down to suit different stakeholders within the business. And again, the tool that we've developed allows you to adapt plans across a floor plate very quickly. And that's not singular plans, but multiple level buildings, multiple spaces, etc. So this demo is going to very quickly show you through how that process works. You upload a building, and again, it can be 1 floor, 2 floors, multiple floors. It can be multiple buildings within a campus as well. And you can upload those into Co-Designer, and then it starts working on how those spaces are laid out. You can also define furniture settings or applications and work style patterns. So you may have open work styles. You may have, for example, individual meeting rooms and various other things within your office. That may be standard, or that may be changed or varied. And particularly around these times at the moment, there may be less people in meeting rooms than before, and they can be adapted to suit those different requirements as well. So you can build out the applications. We also have a huge number of applications that have been developed. Again, they align with some of the standards that our clients use. You can then upload the corporate data. So again, the different divisions within a company, different departments, the headcounts, the sharing ratios, and that may vary between sales and finance, for example. But you can go into the minute detail, and this can be done in Excel and imported in as well. And then things like building standards. Now, obviously, these may change as we go through this COVID situation. But again, what's specific to your market, what's specific to your individual clients. And then stacking, linking departments, allocating them across a floor. These blocks are showing you what that individual department requires. So that includes meeting rooms, it includes collaborative space, it includes their workstations as well. So as you look at it across a floor plate, it allows you to stack those very easily. You're then able to look at other parameters, change things around a floor plate very quickly. And again, this is in slightly sped up, but more or less in real time. What we're also looking to include are things like survey details, survey data that we're getting from clients around culture, around their preferences within a workplace, and also the analytics part that we call our data, which comes in from utilization studies. And then as a planner or designer or a client, you have a basic starting point. You can then start moving things around, and there may be clearance spaces, that may be the size of corridors, there may be different applications that go within a floor plate. So you're really able to tune those up and down. Every individual parameter can be changed for every different department. And again, you can create consistency across that with applications as well. But things like workstations or work style patterns may be developed according to different requirements that clients have, the stakeholders, whether individual spaces and otherwise. So you can start to tune things up like back separators. And now we've got the ability, okay, so you can put in face separators, you can put in side separators, which is becoming more of a discussion point around the COVID situation as well. You can export this as a PDF, so it comes in all the data of the department. So again, you can share that with departments, stakeholders looking at the budgets that might be applied. But also you can have it downloaded as a DXF file, so you can load it back into CAD and start playing around with it. We're working on the Revit file. It's probably the most common question that I get asked when we show Co-Designer. We are working on Revit. We can import Revit. At the moment, we can't export it, so we're still working on that upload. But in terms of the benefits, it is speed, undoubtedly. It provides a really efficient way to look at the early process, but also engage the client through the process and look at real-time planning. You can really come up with multiple scenarios, and I mean, those are almost endless in terms of what you can do and how you can align them. And then looking at things like test fits with clients. How do you align what they're looking for? What are their facility needs? How do you support what they're looking to do? So things like capacity studies, floor plans, contiguous space management, a broad range of different abilities to tune things up and down and modify those parameters. Now, currently, I'm not sure if anyone has joined previous webinars that I've done, but we're doing a trial with co-design and making it available to clients, designers, architects, everybody who would like to trial it. So if you are interested, please reach out to Haworth, and they'll connect you with the right people to be involved in that trial. So when we first started talking, we were looking at obviously workplace of the future. Obviously, what's the key for many of our minds is what's going to happen after COVID. So looking at it from an overall perspective, but looking at it from both the short term and the longer term, looking at things like facility needs, work style rotations, sequencing workforce back into the workplace if that's possible. And again, we're governed by so many rules and regulations that are currently keeping us at home. And the home works that we're now doing is really very different from what we were doing a couple of months ago, which was obviously going to work. You had a very stable or set environment. The environments have changed. How do we modify that as we move forward? And how do we protect the emotions within people as well? How do we protect the cultures that exist within the places that we work? So just in terms of the overall, the three areas that Haworth as an organisation really focused on is these three parts. So human performance, and that's well-being. Initially, that's well-being. How do you implement some of those earlier engagement pieces to make sure the protocols, the systems are right? But also, how do you maybe change things within the space to provide more communication to your employees, to make sure that there is a more robust understanding? Because what can often happen is there's a science-based part to it, and there's the perception-based part to it as well. So how do you make sure that those are both met? And then the organisational performance, and we do a lot in regards to culture analysis and how different cultures exist within companies, within different departments, but how do you allow for that, and how do you provide that sense of security, but also for those cultures to be able to stay put or stay fixed within an organisation, to make sure you're not bleeding out or finding things that, for example, changing the work patterns or the setup that you have within an office, that you're cloistering people and making them less able to collaborate and other things. The other part is facility. And again, there will be changes to the floor plate. We're talking always about density, etc. There will be changes, and we know this may be a short-term side, and we will always look to the future, that you can't plan for one, you have to plan for everybody. And at the same time, really think about what's around the corner, and how do we make sure that we're managing all the things that may come into play as we hopefully take the corner and move towards the light at the end of the tunnel. And I guess from a global perspective, Haworth's involved in almost all markets across the world. We have been involved, we've got manufacturing, we have large offices in China and a lot of big clients in China, same as Hong Kong, same as Taiwan, various other parts of China as well. But the thing that really makes a difference is what's happening there, how are clients already perhaps working towards the end of the tunnel. I'm going to quickly work through some of these and what we're getting feedback on from clients. And again, this is a global perspective. Maybe just individual feedback from individual clients, but giving you a better idea about what's happening. I'll try to relate it also back to India and the design, but also the businesses that are run across different parts of India as well. So three of the factors that are creating the most critical part is how do you create an effective home office? And I guess that's something we're all forced into at a very early stage. There are countries and there are companies still fighting against or working around how they deliver those environments for their teams to work, and that may be in a BPO scenario, office support, etc., back office support. And I've discussed, for example, with a client in Manila recently, where they actually leased a hotel and set that up as part of their business side, so they could have people at home working within that location, but also living within that location, so abiding by the rules and regulations as well. And then they had this opportunity to be able to split shift people out of that as well. But others have also gone through the move to purchase technology, purchase furniture, improve their VPNs to really create robust office spaces, knowing that this situation is not going to completely disappear as we move down the line, that working from home and remote work and flexible working will be part of it as we continue. I'll go through just a few more of these. The other one is cleanliness and the hygiene protocols. Now, around SARS, and again, this takes us back to 2002, 2003, very similar things were put in place around Singapore, where I live. Again, it was around cleanliness. People didn't want to touch doors. There were a lot of clean products to make sure that when you move into a desk, and hot desking and agile working was just coming into play then, but that places where you were able to clean and leave places clean as you left as well. So those protocols, those social factors as well, to make sure that if you are sick, you're not coming to work, and allowing people to really apply to those requirements. So I've got clients and also part of my team based in Hong Kong and Shanghai, and the talk there is in Hong Kong, they actually haven't stopped working. They've reduced the density in some workplaces. I've been talking to Tommy Chan, who's with a consultant over in Hong Kong, but he was saying that they're looking at how they do split shifts, obviously reduce the density within spaces, and then people are still coming to work. But his feeling is you're creating a cocoon at home, you're creating potentially a cocoon at work. There are all these intangible points where COVID or other viruses might be able to come in, and that's obviously public transport. Restaurants are open in Hong Kong, same in Shanghai. People are sitting very close to each other in those scenarios. Obviously, the infrastructure around them is that you're not able to travel, that there's less potential you've got COVID, that you maybe have a green pass in China, which gives you access to certain areas, particularly in Beijing. But the other things are providing this sense of security, the sense of safety, where people are moving around with more freedom, or they haven't, in fact, in Hong Kong been forced to be shut down at all. But things like barriers, and again, we kind of don't recognize perhaps the facility part of the buildings that we have. Those guys or guys and girls that sit at the front desks, that sit at reception, or they're the security, or they're opening doors, or various other facilitation roles that they're playing. Again, they're the front line. They really don't know who's coming at them. And that's potentially where you're putting in screens. And we're seeing this in retail in Australia, and we're seeing it also being applied to those frontline engagements with people that come into spaces. The other thing is obviously around density, and we've got a lot of clients talking about split shift and how they reduce the density as they move into place. And what does that reduced density mean as you move back into the workforce? If people are still working from home, you have that flexibility. Is there ability to downsize your space, because you really don't need it, even with the social distancing and everything that aligns with it. And I think that's also something to keep in mind. But also the key to this is we are social animals, and you look at the Northern Hemisphere as it slowly moves through spring, and it'll eventually hit summer. And I know Neil and Alessandro, London will take more time to hit summer, but nevertheless, you've got this summer coming, and I think people will be less willing to stay at home. So you'll get these hopefully freedoms as the restrictions come down. But we are social animals. We do want to interact. I think I find that interaction and that sociable part of work the most that I've lost out of the weeks that I've been in lockdown in Singapore. So guys, I want to end it there. I want to give you the chance to maybe ask questions. But the perspective that Haworth is really taking is kind of how do we support these three pillars? How do we focus on it both in the short term, the long term, in the workplace, but also at home? How do we really facilitate the best work that we can do, creating the best spaces? Thank you very much. Need to stop sharing.
Sorry, I was making sure I could listen to you. Alessandro, are you talking or are you presenting slides? If you're talking, then please.
I'm talking.
Fantastic.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Brendan. I think that it was a very, very insightful talk because you gave a very, very good overview of what is happening, not just locally in that part of the world, but in general. And I think that this is something that is really, really important to remember, that we are looking into the current situation, the COVID, a global level. Is not regional. A regional problem. It's a real global pandemic, and we are trying to do everything that is possible to basically shorten the time that we will be remaining constrained to one workplace and one living place at the same time. I think that coming to the discussion of specific of COVID-19. I think that moving forward, we will have to come very soon to the conclusion that quite often all the articles, the white paper that we keep reading on Twitter, on the social network, and also on the television, is very, very much focused only on this specific event. But the reality is that we have been through waves of similar pandemic event and wars and other black swan events historically. And apart from the fact that, of course, we always finally succeeded to come out of it, we also learned a lot of things. And ultimately, out of these difficult times, our society, our way of thinking, our behaviors, and the paradigm of how we live has changed. A typical example is, for instance, when at the beginning of the past century, the Industrial Revolution was led by the rapid growth of our city, and streets started to be very, very polluted and were full of infections. And the outbreaks of typhoid and cholera became a very major public health issue. And that eventually changed quite a bit the dynamic of how we construct the cities, and the parliament in England was forced to hurriedly legislate to create new unified sewage system, which was a very, very important step ahead in terms of creating a more healthy and sustainable environment that ultimately have seen on the 2nd of August in 1858 the final sign of the Parliament of the final bill to really create this system, or unified sewage system. And apparently the outbreak reduced by 50% just by creating this new infrastructure, very important infrastructure system in the city of London. 60 years later, 1920, 2 years just after the end of the war in Europe, of the Second World War in Europe, 50 million people died from what is called the Spanish flu. And the interesting thing is that eventually spurred the development of public health system across the developed world. And also a lot of the measures that we currently have been putting in place during this COVID pandemic is really permuted from that period, and that the Spanish flu is basically what we are enacting today is really one of the Spanish flu most enduring effect through the time. Ultimately, as I was saying, we need to look at this event with a more holistic view, and we need to understand better if effectively what has happened with this event is just basically the drop that leaked out of the vase. But the reality is that we have just been fast forwarding 10 years of what was already happening in the world and what was already happening in our cities, and also the behavior that was already taking place in our society, both from an economical point of view and the work lifestyle that we had in the past. So I think that it's important to try to learn the lesson from the past, but also not to limit ourselves to key punctual solution that we need to put in place in this specific moment to go back to work in a safe in a safe way back to our office. But we really need to probably think how the office is designed, how are we approaching the design of our building, and ultimately how the whole system of the cities and the building and the territory is pulled together. Looking at possible scenario for the real estate, our office is working really hard and pulling together all different experts within our team, from anthropologists, experts in sustainability, in technology, and sociology, environmental psychologists, to really try and create a set of potential approach that would ultimately help us to understand how to design the future of our city, how to design the future of our building at 360 degrees. If we look at the scenario, the potential scenario of the real estate in the relatively short term, I was just literally having a discussion yesterday with Alfonso Ponce Alvarez, which is working on the sustainable real estate aspect of our work, and we were making some assumption of what could be the different scenarios. We have outlined two major situations. The first one is basically that if we assume that the virus is contained within the next 4 months, 6 months maximum, and we find ourselves in what is currently called the V-shaped scenario, which sees basically a peak of infection and then drastically a drop due to the effectiveness of the current lockdown, or due to the fact that we finally find the cure for this virus, then the occupational demand should return, hopefully already halfway through the 2021. And but it's difficult, of course, to know exactly when this is going to happen and to predict. But we hope that by the second half of the 2021, we will see our life coming together again, almost as it was before. The impact would be an economical impact, and of course we could see in the real estate there would be some new space being returned to the market, and also some commercial building potentially be repositioned as residential, which is quite an interesting thing, because in London just 2 years ago, the opposite was happening. We were asked quite often, how can we transform our residential into office space because of the decline of the demand for residential, or the offer and abundance in London specifically. Tenants also might seek to look for more flexible lease length and terms than ever before the pandemic. But this is not a direct result of the pandemic. The pandemic, as I say, did just accelerate the timing, but this was already something that was happening, because the way the office is going to be looking like in the future is already changing, and has changed for a long time. And this is just, as I say, the spark that changed things drastically. There is then a second scenario, and the second scenario is a little bit less optimistic. Basically, it foresees that the virus is not contained within the next 6 months, and we will face several waves of smaller lockdowns events throughout the time. In this case, of course, the demand for the workspace might see further decrease, if not an important drop. Home working will be definitely the norm, and many companies will also try to seek to optimize their space and reduce the current existing footprint. What is important to notice is that during this period, it will be fundamentally important the intervention of smart technology, the data, and sustainability will be a key differentiator in keeping the workforce reassured, motivated, and productive, and also to ultimately help defend our cities and our environment from the virus, because technology has made some huge step in helping us to identify, detect what are the key areas of spreading, and presumably they will be an important instrument moving forward to find the solution, the ultimate solution to the current pandemic. Going back to the office, we also started to outline what are the key common things that we see coming out from articles, newspapers, and also from the opinion of different scientists coming from all over the world. We are regularly asked from the Asian continent what will be the office of the future, what it will be then how do we have to build the building of the future, taking into account that waves like these will happen again, presumably in history. And the only thing is that probably will be more prepared in moving forward to the future. And the thing is that there is no the right answer or the wrong answer. We really need to look into this topic, as I say, in the most holistic sense and in the most holistic approach. Definitely some commonalities in the ideas on how to approach the design of our office moving forward in the future, or how to transform the existing real estate asset at the moment are already there. When it comes, for instance, to how to implement a better quality of air, we see the increase of outside air ventilation rates to improve the dilution of contaminants. We see that that is important to enhance the indoor quality through system selection and design to avoid recirculating the air in a similar way to the system that are applied to our hospital. And of course also through mechanical pressurization regime to promote the air movement from clean to dirty areas. Then regarding the measure to support the social distances and apply what is called the 6 feet, and Cushman and Wakefield did come out with a very, very interesting white paper and some initial ideas on how to implement that one. Obviously, the most important thing is to look critically at the current densities in the real estate commercial building, especially in cities where the real estate is a premium, like London, New York, Paris, and therefore the tendency in the past year was always to reduce from the advised 13 square meters per person down to even 8 square meter per person in speculative buildings. Now we are looking at the possibility to probably take a completely different direction and to reduce the occupant density, increase the desk and circulation space, trying to create some visual behavioral nudging into the space to encourage the separation. There was some hint on creating internally into large floor plates also one-way circulation system, allowing for potential additional circulation routes inside the space. Occupancy tracking is a big topic. It's already something that was being identified from a lot of the application that improve our experience within the office, but now we see the application of these tools also expanded to increase the safety in the workplace and have a control on the real-time occupancy on different levels, and so on to describe also workplace experience through the app and support the flexible working and sharing of certain facilities. We also look at minimize the physical contact between people and surfaces and improve the surface hygiene through the design. So there was an interesting article that was appeared on the Guardian, in which there was a big topic regarding how can we create a touchless environment. and not only extended to the office, but also to the public transport. Everywhere is possible to avoid touching surfaces, because we know that that is one of the way of transmission of the current COVID. So we thought about moving into the office through a facial recognition automated system. We are thinking of supporting and enhancing the cleaning through the design, selection of easily cleanable materials, and provision of cleaners room. But also we look at also the use of intelligent antimicrobial materials like copper, and also associated alloys that avoid the viruses from spreading. To close my discussion, I think that one of the big questions that everyone keeps asking is the office going to look like it was looking before? Is the office going to be still the place where we go to work? Basically, is the office going to survive out of this coronavirus? And my answer is that the office is definitely here to stay. As Brendan, you said correctly earlier, we are wired to connect. We are social animals. We are craving the social, visual, and physical contact as well. And the office will always have a special part in our life. As soon as the COVID will be a memory of the past, and we hope that some of the memory will remain with us and will teach us how to move forward and create better environment than ever before. Definitely we will start looking at the office with different eyes. We will have a different approach to the office, but the office will always be a special place where we can go there, socialize, but also we will be attracted to that place because ultimately it is a little bit like a university. There is fast-track learning for both younger generation and older generation. And I think that this is actually two major points of attraction of people, not to stay only at working remotely. Now that we know that it's possible to do it, it's great. I see moving forward to the future that probably half of our time will be working at home, because it will give us back time that is taken away from the transport, that is taken away from the ability to concentrate, and also ability to be more connected to our family. But then ultimately our need also to socialize and to go out there and meet different people and learn will take us back to the office. There is also a big component and a big drive for companies and also landlords to create a better office environment. And this is because since we now discovered that working remotely is actually possible, and it's possible for the most of us in all the industry, in all the different sectors, the big question mark is, why should we go to the office? And companies are trying to use the office as a tool to attract and retain talents. They now have access to remote working jobs at an international level. So in order to make sure that companies manage to attract and retain talent, the office has to be transformed into a real destination. And the offering of outstanding experience when we are at the office has to be the focus of the future design of the office space. We are seeing a lot of discussion internationally during our research, during our work, that they keep asking constantly to us, but how many amount of square meters do we have to dedicate to amenities? And the question that we regularly say is not the quantity of square meters, is the variety and the quality of amenities that you put into design. That is what will be ultimately the attraction point for the generation to come to work there in the office at least 2 or 3 days or a week, and to make this moment of participation a meaningful and basically profitable time, purposeful time to work in the office. And another aspect that needs to be considered is not just that it's important to bring in healthcare, well-being spaces, technology that you cannot necessarily have at home, and that will eventually attract the people to come to the office, but also bring in personal hobbies, spaces for personal hobbies, spaces for all sorts of different amenities that you cannot necessarily have at home. And also take into account that it's very, very important to make sure that the design of spaces for innovation is now set to be transformed to accommodate a neurodiverse workforce moving forward. So this is my view on how we should really move forward into the design of the office for the future.
Thank you, Alessandro. That is much appreciated. I've definitely got some questions for you afterwards. I think my time is now a little short, but I will try to be as brief as possible with my perspective. I'm just going to share some slides with you, if you will bear with me for a second. Hopefully everybody can see the slides. If you could just give me one or two nods to say you can see the slides, that would be fantastic.
Yes.
I think
we can see your slides. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. I think over the last sort of 3 months, probably the most lucrative job in the world has been the manufacturer of crystal balls, because I think what we're now seeing in this sort of once in a lifetime opportunity that we have to look at the workplace in a different way, a huge amount of speculation as to potentially what it may mean, and there's a lot of future gazing and a lot of attempts to predict what the future may be. I'm just going to touch on a few things that we know at present, and then look at potentially for you a solution using GoSpace AI as a smart scheduling approach to look at potentially occupying and using the workplace in a different way. But I think it's safe to say at the moment that the needs of people and the needs of organizations are diverging. As individuals, we are looking for our health and our safety to be safeguarded. We are concerned at physical distancing. We want to make sure that our organizations look after us as much as we want to make sure that we're looked after in society. Whereas with organizations, despite the fact that most office space has been underoccupied in recent years, they're really noticing what a cost to their organization, their workplace is. They're looking for more flexibility, they're looking for greater resilience, and they're looking to reduce their costs. So the needs of people and the needs of organizations seem to be getting further apart. So I think by actually looking at the office in terms of, what is it for, we can actually bring the needs of people and the needs of organizations back to a central point. But this is really all about ourselves creating this new future, not sitting here passively trying to work out what it might be and predict what it might be. But we have this once in a lifetime opportunity to try and create a better future for all of us. So I think there are 9 things that we pretty much know, and I'll go through these very briefly. Really in the sort of the broader scale, I think we've known for many years through many utilization studies that our office space is underutilized, anything from 25 to 75% empty at any point during the day, that our offices are expensive, and using some London costs, we could be looking at anything from £7,500 to £15,000 per desk per year with our real estate. And actually something that COVID has brought into sharp focus is that while we've spent many years looking at how our buildings express our organization's brand and values, what an organization does and the position it takes and the response it's made to COVID is saying much more about it than our physical real estate has ever done. Now that all of these buildings are empty and all of the signs are switched off, it's what the organization is about that actually creates its essential brand in the marketplace. If we think about our own lives with the next 3, the daily commute benefits very few people indeed. We've always seen the commute as being a sort of an unhealthy, expensive, waste of time, particularly those who are used to commuting in big cities. even driving, unless you might be listening to a podcast, but other than that, it's a complete lockout. There's nothing you can do while you're commuting in most instances. In London, it's difficult enough even to read a book. We also know that offices are noisy and distracting. So, and on that basis, collaboration happens far less in the office than we would like it to. So it's very interesting listening to Alessandro making a big claim that the offices, we're social creatures, we need to be together. Yet when we walk through a workplace, we see people sitting with their headphones on, and then when they've taken their headphones off, they're complaining that the office is noisy and distracting, and will everybody leave me alone so I can get on with my work? That doesn't sound like being very social to me. So we actually have a problem in the office with actually collaboration happening, not just on my own terms, but when we all need to collaborate. So understanding the opportunities for collaboration and how that happens. So we have a number of things here that we already know. This is not new information. All of this has been known for many years. There are many articles about it. This is all very much in our consciousness right now. But we are also learning that certain things that have been around for a little while also are very beneficial. We've known for a long time that local working works, and I don't just mean working from home. At the moment, many of us in many cities are actually, the home is our only option. But when we're allowed to use a lot of the local amenities again, we will find that we have many more choices than we have now. So if we do balance our home time and our local time and our office time, we will find that we can create a balance that works for us and our organisation. And so how do we manage people who are working in that way? Well, if we invest a little more time and a little more thought, management by objective works. We don't need to see people to know that they're working. When we can see people, we don't know if they're working, we just know we can see them. So management by objective, if we invest in this, can actually be beneficial. And we also know that our digital workplace tools work. We're on a call at the moment with somewhere in the region of 760 people dialed into this from a number of countries around the world. This would be impossible to create in a physical location, and the cost of it would be enormous. The only cost of this now is your time. It is a phenomenal experience, and a number of the webinars that I've done have really brought home to me just how amazing the digital platforms we have now are. So enterprise social networks, our collaboration tools, our web platforms, these are all keeping us connected, just in different ways to the ways that we were more commonly used to before. So all of these things are very clearly known to us. So when we think about creating the future we want from our workplace, we actually have a lot of information already that we've known for some time that we can process. So if we take a typical office building, let's say 1,000 people, and let's give a sort of reasonably international number in terms of square meters a head, so let's call it 10, that would give us an office of 10,000 square meters. And pre-COVID, this is what we did. And we planned our workplaces based on everybody turning up every day, but they never do. What we end up with is a workplace that is probably somewhere in the region of 40 to 60% occupied, let's call it 50% occupied on a day-to-day basis. So it is quite interesting now with a number of CFOs realizing with the office being empty, just how much their office is costing, whereas before COVID, half of it was empty anyway. And yet it was a position that we actually, as organizations, tolerated. So if we then think about the pre-COVID approach and we adjust it and we say, okay, so we've had a pretty positive response within our organization to remote working. So let's assume that 500 people work remotely. And now let's think about catering for just 500 people in the office building on a regular basis. At 10 square meters a head, that's only 5,000 square meters. We've saved 50% on our real estate. But people are nervous about working in a workplace now at 10 square meters a head, so they will need more space. So let's assume that we double that and we give everybody 20 square meters a head, we're back to 10,000 square meters. But not just back to 10,000 square meters, with only 500 people and only 50% utilization, we will have 10,000 square meters, which is occupied to 25%. So it's even more wasteful than we had before. So using GoSpace AI, which is in a similar way to Haworth, is an artificial intelligence application. It enables yourselves in managing real estate to be able to to schedule people in space to make sure that the right people are always working together, and you only use the space you need. So using this tool, we've applied it to say, with the 500 people who need to be in the workplace, not everybody needs to collaborate with everybody all of the time, but there are some key collaborations that we need to achieve. So we map the collaboration needs of the business and we build that into the artificial intelligence. We also map the forecasting in as well, so we can understand how or what teams may need in the future. And when everybody is back in the workplace, we map the utilization without using sensors. We have our own means of gathering utilization data as well. So there's no capital expense for this. But if we have 500 people working in the office and we've mapped those collaborations, we might just bring 100 people in every day. Those people will work remotely when they don't need to be working closely with their colleagues. When they need that face time, they can come into the office, and they would only need, working at 20 square meters ahead on those days, the organization would only need 2,000 square meters of space. But because our people are scheduled to come in on certain days, as it makes sense within their collaborations, we expect to see 95% roughly of the office being occupied. So instead of having a huge tower block, which is only 50% occupied, or applying that same logic to a post-COVID situation, probably only a quarter occupied, we've got, including some amenities and some ability to bring our remote people in for occasional all-hands meetings, a 3,000 square meter office, which is being incredibly well utilized. And I talked about the goals of people and organizations diverging. This brings them back together. People will have more space in the office. They will know that when they come into the office, they're coming into the office for a good reason, which is to collaborate with their colleagues. And they know they'll be collaborating with the people they need to work with. So they will be happy, they will have a better quality of life, and they will have purposeful collaboration when they're in. The organization has saved 70% of its real estate costs. The organization now has a very resilient, very flexible product. And using the scheduling tool, if a situation changes at any point in time, it takes less than a minute to run a new scenario and be able to output a new allocation of space for a particular day or a particular time of day. And the employees don't have to do anything other than receive information telling them where they need to be and when. So for the employees themselves, there is no booking, there's no applications to use, it is all done for them. There is no additional hassle factor involved in all of this. And so this isn't agile working, this isn't one-to-one traditional working. Smart scheduling gives us an opportunity based on the things that I just described that we know, to be able to create a future that we're designing. We're not sitting there predicting, wondering what's going to happen. We're saying, no, this is the future we actually want. This is a future that works for both our people and the organization, and it's hugely effective. Now, for most organizations, we think that they can do this for a significant period of time using the space they already have. Because most offices these days, modern offices, are designed on sort of agile or flexible principles. So it would be quite possible to take 3,000 square meters of an existing 10,000 square meter building and use it with a smart scheduling approach. It doesn't need to be redesigned. I think one of the things I've seen in a lot of the material published since the lockdown began is that we're constantly looking at what the office will look like. We're looking at creating static realities again. The scenario that we're facing in the future is that it will be a highly dynamic and highly fluid reality. So thinking about our workspace in terms of a static fixed reality is no longer going to be appropriate. We are going to need to change regularly, adjust, measure as we go to make sure that the needs of people and the needs of organizations can be brought together. So that is an idea of a potential future scenario for you that can work, is available now, and we can start looking at that in terms of a post-COVID response if that would be something your organization would be interested in doing. So you've probably heard from me for enough of the time now. We're going to have I'm going to ask the panelists a few questions for the next 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will open up the questions for those of you listening. So thank you for your patience, everyone. I hope you found the content useful so far. But I do have a question for both Brendan and Alessandro, if I may ask you in turn, and I'm fine with who goes first. But whilst you've looked at what the future may be like, what sort of future would you like to see?
The future that I would like to see, I think that it's very much the future that was already almost the present in the past year, which means that I will be able, as a worker, as a knowledge worker, to work in high level of mobility, decide my day, how to schedule my work, have the freedom to go to the office when it's strictly required and when I have to have purposeful meeting, basically. And this also means having the possibility to meet my colleagues at a social level and not just necessarily for a specific task. Obviously, this is not something that will happen soon, but I hope that in a way or the other that is going to happen again. And another thing that I think that I would like to see is, as you correctly say, I would like to see a future where application and the technology really helps us to manage our day and move in safety in an office space that is not overcrowded, and allows us to understand at any given time during the day how can we occupy a space in safety and in the office space and in a more purposeful way. I think that would be the idea. Of course, the office has to be an amazing experience. The office has to provide me everything that I don't have at home. And it's not only from a social point of view and from a collaboration point of view, but also in terms of the technology that is available there, the tools that are available there, and why not even bringing in some of my personal hobbies, because that would make it really an attractive place. And the office also will have to look more and more like a university, where you go there and have a fast-track learning at any given age, at any given time of your professional life.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. What's your view of what you'd like to see, despite the sort of many predictions? And how would you describe the ideal future?
Yeah, Neil, if I can just change the question a little bit, what I expect to see is little change to the workplace in the short term. I think, you look at what's in place now. Some companies have spent a lot of money with the help of Foster and Partners and others to kind of develop these wonderful spaces that are very collaborative. I think those shine in all their existence and their brand and their expression of people and coming together. And I wouldn't want to see that change. I don't think that if we can avoid that changing, they're there for the right principles. Collaboration has been what we've been all preaching about for the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And I think that needs to still be a real strong part of workplace and what we do. There will be short-term measures that people take, and hopefully they're only short-term to be able to screen up or separate a little bit. But I'm really hoping it doesn't involve screens. I'm really hoping it involves social distancing. How do we avoid adding rather than subtracting from the situation? Ideally, I want to go back to normal, but I know that like 9/11, travel never was the same after that. It'll be the same as the workforce. I think we'll all change slightly, but it may be the systems, the protocols, the cleanliness, the hygiene. You don't come to work when you're sick. All those right things that as human beings we have responsibility to do to allow all of us to live and work more cooperatively together.
Okay. There's been a couple of questions through the Q&A line here around sort of what might be called in the industry serendipitous encounters, casual collisions. I have my sort of personal views on this. They occur in physical space a lot less frequently than we talk about. They've generated a lot of attention, but actually occur a lot more readily in digital space than they do in physical space. While we've been in lockdown and away from the office, what do you think has happened to those serendipitous encounters? Do you see them happening in digital space? Do you see them happening elsewhere? And if they're not happening, what do you think the impact has been on organisations?
I actually had a conversation with one of my team up in Shanghai today, and she was saying that there is a push between the universities to kind of get people back engaged, and they've even got astronauts sharing time on webinars, to kind of connect, and you can ask questions and, really engage. You're saying that before there was never that open channel to experience and particularly to people who are really involved in the business. So I think like this webinar, we're really kind of opening up our situations and sharing our thoughts and allowing people to question and sort of probe their way through it as well. So it is definitely providing more of those unexpected moments. Nice to meet you both, and I hadn't met you before, but again, this is another opportunity for perhaps us to work hopefully again face to face in the future. But I just think there are moments like that. I know of companies who have slowed down the coffee line so that people connect. But again, you're right, that is serendipitous. Putting people together in the right situation can be a little contrived. So I think this works. It's an interesting approach. I'm willing to try anything and everything.
It's been interesting, the degree of informality that has crept into our working styles when we can see into each other's houses, and we can see the sort of chaos of kids and pets disrupting our thought channels. And in many ways, it's a degree of informality that I think has been hugely welcome. Actually, we're all I think we're all better for that. But I think it's also quite interesting that certainly a number of the people that I've met online, I'm having conversations that in a slowed down coffee queue I probably wouldn't have, because I've tried that with slowing coffee queues, and all that happens is people spend longer looking at their own phones in those slowed down coffee queues than they do talking. So I think it's something for us to see how this unfolds, really, in terms of how potentially we cope with the loss of those casual encounters in physical space, but how we make up for them in digital space.
Neil, I would like to take few people on screen for question answer. They are I request to all of them, please come on screen and keep yourself mute when you want to ask question, and then you can ask question and then have that conversation.
I think these are some great insights from the panelists, and I really enjoyed the session by all the panelists, and Neil has put some great insights in terms of smart scheduling. My question is based on the density of the current offices which are being used. So we've seen in India that most of the occupiers are not following the guidelines of the 10 square meter, and most of the offices are designed for an area of less than 10 square meter. So how would you see how difficult it will be for the occupiers to bring those changes, and what is the sort of time period you see that they are going to take?
I think my example was really based on just using some very round numbers. I think I was working with a client earlier this week on a similar approach with a sort of much more gentle move to smart scheduling in the first instance. So really all I'm saying is as a principle, you can apply whatever numbers you want to that and achieve whatever outcome. You may decide that you'd like people to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week, in which case you're going to need some more space. But I think it's just making sure that you're able to align the goals of the organization with the goals of individual people, because that's going to be our biggest stress point when the return starts to happen. People are going to have to navigate commuting, they're going to have to navigate sort of the schedules they keep individually. And if there are going to be few people in the office because we're not taking a management approach to this and we're not scheduling people's time in the office, there's every possibility that they will go through this fairly anxious and risky journey to get to the office and find when they get there that all of the people they need to see aren't there at all. So we have to make sure that we're making it worthwhile for people to come to the office. They have a high degree of certainty that the people they want to collaborate with will be there at the same time. So all I would suggest really is, and it's a great question, is just play with the numbers in that sense and see if you can find something that would work for you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bharat. You can mute yourself. Pallavi, you please, you can ask your question, Pallavi.
Thank you, Tushar. Thank you, everyone. Hi, Neil.
Hello.
Neil, you're familiar with this book, I believe.
Yeah, I've seen it once or twice, yeah.
So, Neil, actually, I wanted to ask you, in your book, later in the towards the end, you have talked about what could go wrong. And you have mentioned something about natural obsolescence. And
Yes.
you did mention about how our industry is sort of like a slow catch-on to what actually happens. And I think the pandemic has kind of pushed this into a little bit of a fast-forward mode. What do you think? Do you think it's really a natural, occurrence of what was actually already coming in? Or do you think it's something unusual still?
I think it's accelerated a lot of things that were already being talked about, but our industry sort of operates both, on a very slow level underneath, and then on a very sort of fast level, a quite noisy level above. And a lot of the trends that have now been accelerated have been the slow ones that have been sort of going on underneath. I was involved with groups that were advocating teleworking 25 years ago. And now suddenly we have we've been forced into a situation where we have to work in this way, and we've been exploring tools that we may not have really felt the need to explore until now. So we're just bringing a lot of these trends into sharp focus. But I think it really is, and I can't, I've known a number of people sort of be quite concerned about where this all goes. I think the opportunity for us is incredible, but we have to ask the deep questions. We have to ask, why we're doing this. What is the office actually for? And the question I posed in an article I wrote a couple of days ago was, if all of the office buildings in the world disappeared overnight, if we asked ourselves these difficult questions, would we recreate the same reality, or would we create something entirely new? If it's something entirely new, then why don't we commit to trying to create that from what we have now? So we have a huge opportunity in our hands, and if we want to accelerate the obsolescence of some old ideas and some old approaches, between us we can do that.
So just a very quick follow-up on that, Neil, is do you really think COVID is natural or something unusual in your mind? Is it something you thought that it was just okay, or I think this is something very unusual, but it has kind of brought in what was already in the queue. What is your take on that?
Well, I've never seen a pandemic before, and I don't think most people here probably haven't, unless they've been working where some of the potential pandemics have arisen but have been contained. But I think what's been quite interesting is now that we are in this situation, we start to learn how much planning and how many times the possibility of a pandemic was brought to government's attention over the years. There's been a lot of thinking and planning and working on the possibility of a pandemic for many years in the past. But I think, like a lot of events like 9/11, now like COVID, organizations will want to make sure that this is very much part of their risk profile going forward. So they will want real estate, and they will want workplaces that are highly flexible, highly resilient, and won't leave them with a huge cost with no benefit while we deal with the situation. So I can see organizations having an incredibly sharp focus on the cost of their real estate and how well it's performing for the business for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pallavi. Valentin, you want to ask? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for your insightful talk. Neil, Alessandro, I've met you before. Nice to meet you, Brendan. I think I had a lot of questions before your intervention and again, insightful talks. Most of them have been already answered, but maybe one point, Neil, you didn't talk about, one point in your book. So the question will be, is the fully adaptable, agile workspace is the new future? Or as you say, and as you name it in your book, the permanent beta workspace? It's something that we can really see as a fully new trend.
I think that the sort of the beta approach, which is a perpetual experiment, a workplace is never finished. I think will be brought into very sharp focus in the near future. I think organizations will have to adapt incredibly quickly, and that's a process, as I said earlier, of sort of measuring and adapting and adjusting constantly. I think it'll bring that into sharper focus for organizations, that it's not a case of a one-off huge project where we create this static reality and then hope it's going to be okay for the next 10 years. We're going to have to get much more involved in evolving the workplace in the future. And I think, Alessandro, you may have a view on that too.
Yeah, I think that it's a very, very complicated topic moving forward to the future, and quite correctly, everyone is saying, we are speculating what the future will wait for us. But for me, it's much more important, going back to your question, what is the future that we want? And do we want to redesign the office as it was before? Do we want the office to be something slightly different? And as I say, my point of view is that I would like to see an office that is a little bit like a university. I had a great time in the university. I had both the possibility to encounter people that taught me something, both that were colleagues, that were students like me, and teachers. At the same time, I had great facilities in my hand that I couldn't have at home. And when I had to do the hard work, the focus work, I was going back home, and that is where I was doing most of the work on a daily basis. I think that something down the line to the university space, it might be very interesting. And the university space is also a place where, moving forward to the future, we will see much more of the presence of corporate companies that work together with the university on a specific project and on a specific topic. So it's a little bit of a combustion of the two things, but still, quite rightly, the idea of having a smart application that allows to work in security and in a more organized matter will be definitely the future. Also because going back to the question of Neil earlier, I think that Neil, you have a point when you're saying that a lot of the collaboration happens now also online, because quite strangely, being online breaks some of the barriers that we have socially. Not everyone is Italian in this world. Not everyone go and disturb the first person that passed by because you are just desperate to talk to someone.
Hopefully that answers your question, Valentin. Good to see you as well.
Valentin, just to add to that, and I guess you provide perspective. I mean, the tools that Neil's company and ours are kind of looking to develop is, how do you add more data into that system to be able to almost predict what's going to happen? So, whether it's utilization sensors, whether it's culture, whether it's preferences, whether you've got that information that you can add into it to be able to give you a floor plan that can constantly change and suit the environment, suit the applications, suit what people are doing, and whether it's the workforce or it's changing to suit particular requirements at that time.
Okay, Tushar, you had some other guests waiting with questions, I believe.
Only 5-7 minutes to finish the session, and Alessandro, you have to, I think you want to leave?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have another call starting now.
Okay, so we'll take quickly one or two questions. Shweta, please.
Thanks, Tushar. Thanks, everybody. Very insightful session. Very quickly, I want to ask you, I'm an architect, and we are already getting a lot of clients asking us, what do you see as design changes in the new facilities that are going to be started now? So since you've heard so much, you've read so much all across the internet, so many articles, if I had to say between smart scheduling, which is going to prioritize digital working, collaborating digitally, and then planning your calendars to come and do meetings or collaborations in Workspace, to what Alessandro said, that the workspaces have to be even more experiential, more university-like, a higher degree of amenities. And the business would say, hey guys, what about my real estate costs? Which all of these items you think will start getting prioritized in order of importance? It's something which I want to understand as an architect who's going to talk to clients. So just trying to understand the various mindsets across different sets of people. One is business owner, one is the employee, and one is a team. So how do we look into it? Of course, this is going to be an evolving story, but how do we drive design solutions for new upcoming projects?
I think a lot depends on where the organization is at with the lockdown and with its very existence in some places. I think cost will be fundamental to many organizations, but within the sort of parameters of wanting to make sure that the right people are working together, because I think one of the impacts of the lockdown will be that any function that rolls up into innovation within the business will have been struggling during this period of time. It's why I said that when we need to collaborate, we don't need to collaborate with everybody all the time. We need to collaborate with the right people. So organizations will want to contain their cost while still ensuring that the channels to innovation are functioning. And I think personally, I think the sort of future that Alessandro describes is probably a little further away as a result. Because I think there are sort of it's a critical recovery mode that we'll be entering when the lockdown is lifted. Contain costs, bring the right people together, get the business back into the right shape, and then start developing from there.
Thank you, Neil. I think Alessandro has to leave. Thank you, Alessandro, for coming for this session and giving us time. Really very insightful session. And
thank you very much for everyone. And sorry if I've overcome the time of someone else.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you, Alessandro.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shweta. Ben, do you have a question?
I do actually have a question for Neil.
Yeah.
Hi, Neil. At last we meet. It's funny you talk about serendipity. We've not actually spoken, and here we are. Greetings from the Swiss Alps. Quick question is, obviously, a lot of these themes are being discussed at the moment about the home office, how it's going to affect businesses. What I'm interested in, and the reaction I'm getting from a lot of people, is how will that affect office culture? Will there be a loss of identity for certain companies, and how do they deal or respond to that?
I think it's a great question, and I think time will tell in certain instances. But I'm amazed at how many organisations have sort of risen to the challenge really that's been presented by COVID. There seems to be no middle ground. You're either in an organisation that has really risen to that challenge and is doing great work and is showing a lot of empathy and understanding and has approached its sort of markets and its customers in the right way, and there are organisations that have done the complete opposite and have approached it in a fairly poor way and have not treated their customers and clients particularly well. You almost have to be in one of the two buckets, but for those organisations that really have responded well, I think we're showing the power really of how organisational behaviour can create a sense of being part of something bigger, a sense of belonging. We've spent many years thinking that workplaces should be almost the primary sort of point at which we create cultural connection. And while I think they've been valuable in certain instances in doing that, I think we're now seeing, when we take that away, just how powerful it can be when an organisation behaves incredibly well in a situation like this, to feel part of that, to be part of that, to be proud of its behaviour, to be proud to represent it openly and externally. And so I think we're all learning something, quite important here, really, about organisational behaviour and how an organisation represents itself in its external environment. And we may never have learned that if we'd have relied on the physical space to do that. But I'm also fascinated by some organisations like Automatic, like Trello, who've never had any real estate in their life. They have been created and they've grown and they've developed their products and their market offer, and they have never gone out and leased any space. And yet people who work for those organisations feel part of it, feel like they're part of something bigger, and feel a lot of pride in what that company does.
Do you think there's a risk if companies using your kind of model before of slimming down the office spaces to a minimum, and being clever about the scheduling with the AI integration. One of the questions that have been thrown at me a couple of times is, we'll never have everybody in on the same day. We'll never have that. And I know it's also to do with this serendipity theme. But do you think we're almost looking to create events teams that will try and actively build new avenues for companies to exchange with each other?
That's why I suggested that the amenity space was, as a proportion, was quite large, really. So we're reducing the office space functionally to a smaller level, but by creating a significant amenity space, we're acknowledging the fact that bringing people together for those interactions is a little more social than it is potentially just to sit at a desk with headphones on and hope you might bump into someone at some point during the day. But if I know that I'm going into the workplace once a week and I know who I'm going to see and I know I'm going to get a chance to peer review my staff or share ideas or develop some plans, I'm going to be quite excited about that day. I'm going to look forward to going in that office that day. I'm not going to think, oh God, here comes the morning commute again. We'll have a different mindset around what it means then to be social and working with our colleagues. Because actually, for a lot of the time, all I hear and I see written is people complaining about, disturbing, distracting, noisy, just unpleasant working environments. I've sat in people's receptions and watched people trooping in the morning, absolutely looking like they don't want to be there. And so, maybe when people do come in, they come in with a spring in their step, smile on their face, looking forward to seeing their colleagues, looking forward to doing something really useful and meaningful. And so we start to create a different mindset around what it means to come into the office. And in many ways, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing to have a little bit of sort of bubbling demand in there for coming in. Can I come in on days a week, not one?
The rebirth of the office, then.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that in time, more office space is created gradually because the value of it is seen. But we will have gone back to answering the fundamental question, which is, what is this place for? And if we end up in the future with a reality that looks a little bit like pre-COVID reality, but we're all much happier being in that space and we're all much more assured of why we're there at all, then we'll have done something really worthwhile.
Brilliant. Thank you.
I think you also, obviously we need to take into account the different cultures which exist within an organisation. Not everyone's made the same. Not everyone wants a bubbly location. Some people just want to put their heads down and their thumbs up and type code. But at the same time, I think the ability to be able to be in two places, to be at home and work effectively, is not all of us, but some of us have discovered, or be at work. I think that's the gateway to kind of that flexible thinking, and it really does make workplaces that place of experience. That is what you want to come in for, whether it's experience with your colleagues, experience with a brand, experience with everybody in the same place. That kind of becomes a destination as a result. So those cultures need to be taken into consideration, and the wider workplaces you could be in.
Thank you everyone. Last question from Jack Harvey.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for very informative presentations and a great discussion. So I'm an acoustician, and I'm very interested about how the office environment will change acoustically. And Neil, you've mentioned a few times now about how noise seems to be, in your mind, one of the biggest problems in offices at the minute. If we're doing different things in offices and they're less densely occupied, the acoustic environment is going to change. How are companies going to cope with that or manage that?
I'm not necessarily sure it's something that I believe in. I'm quite comfortable in a buzzing office environment, but it's a lot of what I hear and a lot of what people talk about. And if you look at the Leesman survey, I think noise consistently comes out on top as the thing that people are least happy with in their workplace. So there is some data to support that. I think you're right though, with a workplace where its function changes to fundamentally collaborative, then yes, acoustically it will have a very different pattern, because people won't be there just sort of taking calls at their desk and having the sort of interactions they have now. So I would probably see a workplace of the future becoming a little more broken up into sort of smaller community spaces, which can be acoustically treated in each respect. I think it's going to be an easier proposition. I think your job's about to get significantly easier. And I think you'll probably enjoy the outcome a lot more as well, rather than having people say, well, it's still not quite working. So I think yes, there will be a different acoustic response over time in the future, probably not immediately, but as we understand the purpose of the office and as we understand how to get the most out of it, and potentially in the future as we start to relax the amount of space that everybody is allocated individually when they're there.
Jack, can I just explain with an example? I mean, obviously we've got operations in China and we deal with a lot of Chinese customers there. They're saying we don't want to be in an enclosed meeting room. Yes, we know that it has the acoustic properties that we want, but we don't want to be in that enclosed space because we don't have the portable air cleaner that's sitting right here next to our desk. So people are moving out into the open office to have team meetings and to be engaged, giving themselves more space, relocating, and as Neil was saying, creating these sort of social spaces across the floor plate. So it's almost like the boxes may dissipate, the walls may dissipate because you're providing these wider open areas where you can provide this natural social distance between people, and they also have equally the same acoustic issues. So again, I agree with Neil, you're going to be bloody busy, mate.
I also agree with Neil in that I think I might be less busy, because the biggest problem I see acoustically is when people want to do their individual focused work. And that's when they're most disturbed by noise, and it's most annoying. So if they now take that home with them more often, so you're less disturbed when you're collaborating with other people, from other people, you're more tolerant to it. So I think it'll be very interesting.
We've also approached it at the same situation. Like how do you, for example, I've got an executive that has a home office. Yes, it's a small location in London, wherever. He's got a family, he's doing homeschooling, various dogs, animals, people running around. How do you create potentially a small space that might be able to be equipped with the audio visual and the acoustics, even if it's a temporary location or a sort of fold-out cupboard sort of scenario where you can provide them a solution for that. So again, I think it's the office, and that's changing, and it's the home which we need to adapt to as well.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming on this session, Neil, Brandon, and everyone. Really, thank you for giving us time and giving your insightful session today. And for all attendees, I would like to thank you also to having so much of patience and being part of Workplace Trends webinar series. We have a very interesting seminar tomorrow at 5 p.m. again with Kevin Gilbo. He's an international design head for 3M. He will be talking about innovation, design, and future of changes in workspaces, products, social distancing. It's a very good session. I request all of you to please come and attend this session tomorrow, and also follow us on LinkedIn for regular updates, upcoming news and webinars. Thank you, all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Neil. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brandon.